What's up guys, Asian here again with another build basics video, and today we're going to be discussing the various types of damage and basically what affects them and how they're different. So there's a lot of confusion about what constitutes specific types of damage, specifically the term magic damage. I've seen a lot of posts on Reddit, the official forums. I've seen questions asked in a couple of the discords I'm in, as well as the guild chats and a couple of guilds that I'm in as well. Why is War Maiden not meta? Why is War Maiden not good? And the kind of basis around it, people who are asking that question is, it says it boosts magic damage. So why, aren't more people using it? Doesn't it boost all the damage that you do as a Magicka DPS? And the answer to that is, it is magic damage with a capital M and not spell damage. So those are two very different terms when you are using them in ESO, and so hopefully this video will kind of explain what is magic damage, what is spell damage, and all the other different types of damages that are in the game. So we'll start off first with the different types of spell damage in the game, and then we'll swap over to a stamina DPS and show you the various types of weapon damage and physical damage basically in the game. So right now we're on our Sork here, and so the basis behind all this kind of began with, let me see if I have a set here. I should have some War Maiden. So this set here, War Maiden, so it is a light armor set, drop set, overland, so you can buy it. This comes from Vardenfell, so you don't need to have access to the Morrowind expansion in order to buy it off of guild traders, and it's kind of the 5-piece that kind of scratches people's heads. So it adds X amount of spell damage to your magic damage abilities. Now, notice that the 4-piece effect says it adds 124 spell damage. And to many unexperienced or inexperienced players, players who are just starting to get into theory crafting and trying to make more optimized builds for whatever content that they want to clear, they don't really know the difference between spell damage and magic damage, and that's not on them. ESO is very, very opaque when it comes to this kind of stuff. So basically, what it is spell damage affects everything that you do, every single piece of damage that you do as a Magicka DPS, whether that's light attacks, heavy attacks, your abilities, and your ultimates. No matter what type of damage that you deal, as long as it comes from a Magicka-based ability or a staff attack, spell damage will increase that damage. Now, magic damage, as it is described on this 5-piece set, is something completely different. Now, so if we go into our skills, we'll first take a look at crystal fragments, because this deals magic damage. So you can see here, it deals 13,890 magic damage. Now, magic damage is a specific type of magical damage. It is a specific type of spell damage, is one way to think of it. So magic damage, so War Maiden would boost the damage from crystal fragments because it deals magic damage. Now, where this kind of comes into really great confusion to a lot of new players is elemental blockade, and this basically says, if you read it from the tooltip from your skill book, so in this screen right here, it says it deals magic damage to enemies every 1 second. But if we actually look at it while it's on our bars, it actually deals shock damage. So what happens here is that elemental blockade, and it's the same thing with destructive clench. Destructive clench, the tooltip on the skill window says magic damage, but if I put it on my bar here, you'll see that it actually changes to shock damage when it is on my bar. So what's happening here is basically that a lot of players are seeing this tooltip saying magic damage and saying, oh, War Maiden will be really good. However, they don't realize that when you put it on the bar, it swaps to the elemental type of your staff. So now, let's talk about the elemental types of damage now. There's 3 types of damage. There's fire damage, or flame damage, which comes from fire damage sources. Shock damage, which comes from all lightning sources, so shock, so your lightning staves, liquid lightning, things like that. And then there's frost damage, which, as you can imagine, comes from all sources of cold damage, so your frost staffs, Winter's Revenge on a warden, for example. And all 3 of those different elemental types are different types of damage, and they have different sets that affect that damage. So, for instance, for flame damage, Silks of the Sun is what affects that damage. Netch's Touch affects shock damage, and Use Grimoires affects frost damage. And so those are all different types of damage compared to magic damage. Magic damage is a completely separate kind of school of magical damage. So if you want to think of magical damage, like spell damage, you can think of it as 4 different types. You have a neutral type, which would be considered spell damage or magic damage. So that would be something like Crystal Frags or Daedric Mines or Haunting Curse. Those all deal magic damage, so they're neutral. There's no element involved in them. Then there you have the 3 elemental types of damage. So that's going to be your fire damage, your shock damage, and your frost damage. All 4 of these have different effects. So fire damage can proc burning, light shock damage can proc concussed or minor vulnerability, and frost damage can proc chilled, which is minor maim. Magic damage can't proc any status effect at all. And so all 4 of these have different sets that affect them. So War Maiden for magic, Silks of the Sun for flame, Netches for shock, Use Grimoires for frost, and all 4 are affected by spell damage. So that's basically all of the different types of magical damage in the game. So War Maiden, while it might sound good because based on the tooltips, it says that elemental blockade deals magic damage, destructive clench does magic damage, but if you take a look at the actual when it's on your bar, it deals elemental damage. So that's why War Maiden is not very good for a lot of Magicka DPS. Now, physical damage, let's swap over to a Stamina DPS. Physical damage has a couple different types of damage as well, and there aren't that many sets out there that affect each of them. Rather, there are effects that deal different damage. Let's swap over to my Stamblade here. So much like magical damage, you have weapon damage, which affects all of the different subtypes of physical damage, and then you have, I believe it's, technically there's 4 different subtypes of physical damage that we're going to go over. So obviously the first one is going to be called physical damage. This is very specific. This is not the same as weapon damage. Automatons, which come from Darkshade Caverns, that increases physical damage, and so that is a specific subset of damage in the game. So once we load in, I'll show you guys a classic skill that deals physical damage, which is going to be Endless Hail. Come on, load. Come on. Reloading. Alright, there we go. Alright, so as I said, there are four different subtypes of weapon damage. So if we take a look here, physical damage is going to be the first type, and it's going to be one of the more common types. So Endless Hail deals physical damage, Rearming Trap deals physical damage, Caltrops deals physical damage, and like I said, Automatons is the set that increases physical damage. So it will not improve the damage of your poison injection because that doesn't deal physical damage. That deals poison damage, which is a different subset of weapon damage. So poison damage is the next most common, typically speaking. This comes from things like poison injection, if you're a Stam BK, venomous claws. If you're using weapon poisons, those also count as poison damage as well. So that is one of the more common sources, but it is completely separate from physical damage. Physical damage is a different source of damage, and so it is affected by different sets. So automatons will not affect your poison damage. Now, a third type of weapon damage is going to be disease damage. Let's see here. So under Relentless Focus, our Assassin Scourge deals disease damage. This is not very common. Usually the only source of disease damage for most Stamina DPS is going to be coming from Veladress, if you're using Veladress instead of Selines or something like that. Nightblade are the ones that have the most amount of disease damage because of Assassin Scourge, which deals a lot of damage. It usually makes up anywhere from like 10 to 15% of your DPS, sometimes even more depending on your amount of buffs you have, the amount of procs you're getting, things like that. So disease damage is pretty rare. As far as I know, there are no sets that improve disease or poison damage. Like there isn't a 5-piece that says adds 400 weapon damage to your poison damage attacks. There is a set called Swamp Raider, which does increase the damage, I think, of your poison abilities when your enemy is affected by the poison status effect, but you don't have like an equivalent of automatons to poison and disease damage. Now, the fourth type of damage is something that most people don't actually think of, and that's something called bleed damage. So if we go over to Blood Craze or Rending Slashes, Um, so technically bleed damage falls under physical damage. However, there are some bleeds that don't count as physical damage. So most bleeds will count as physical damage, but there are a couple that don't count. I don't know them off the top of my head. But technically speaking, bleed damage is going to be considered separately from physical damage. However, they are boosted by automatons and anything else that affects physical damage. So even though the game seems to code bleed damage as a separate source of damage from physical damage, it still counts as physical damage for about 99% of the different types of bleeds that you have in games. So the axe bleed, for instance, counts as physical damage. Blood crazy rending slashes count as physical damage. But there are some sets in the game that improve damage to bleed effects. And when they say bleed effect, it needs to specifically say in the tooltip causes them to bleed. So it's not your typical like damage over time. It needs to specifically say bleed. So that's kind of why I'm considering bleed damage as a fourth subset, because there are a couple of sets that affect only bleed effects. So even though there are deal physical damage, because of that secondary effect, the extra effects, I do consider it as a separate subtype of weapon damage. So kind of to summarize everything, so there's weapon damage for stamina DPS that kind of affects all the damage that you do, and then there are subtypes of physical damage, or weapon damage I should say. You have physical damage, then which is kind of the neutral damage, so to speak. It doesn't really have any status effects. Then there's poison damage, which does have a status effect associated with it. It's poisoned. It's basically just a dot, a small dot. Then you have disease damage, which can inflict, I want to say it's major defile, which is healing taken. So it's not very useful for PvE, but it can be very useful for PvP. And then finally, and this is kind of a small formality, there is bleed damage, and that's only there because there are some set effects in the game that only affect bleed damage, not physical damage. So that's why I consider that a subtype, but a lot of people don't consider it a subtype because most bleed damage in the game is considered physical damage. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative, and I hope this cleared up a little bit of confusion about the War Maiden's 5-piece effect and kind of what the different types of damage are in the game. And I will see you guys in the next dungeon.